these last parts here are meant to be the work focused on unraveling what's called the so-called cardophonetic alphabet. So here we have what's called the present-day standard model of what we're told to believe was the Egyptian alphabet, where A is the vulture, B is the hand, D is another hand, E is this reed, and then we have what's called the reality. In other words, A comes from the hoe, B comes from this woman, the stars of space goddess, G comes from the man with an erection, who forms letter G, and D comes from the birth canal of the woman, which becomes the pudenda. She births the son. And then E is the triple phallus, which means seeding, which is why there's two E's in the word seed. So this is a 200-year-old alphabet, but Egyptologists will defend this and they'll say, oh, it's all been proved by Young and Champollion. So here's a pic from 3 days ago from the Egyptian mythology sub. It's called the hieroglyphic alphabet. With a lot of comments. Most of it saying, "No, this is a you can read them yourself." But here we see a vulture, A, foot equals B, cup equals C, D equals hand, and so on. And the so-called horned viper equals F, and we just end up a lot of nonsense. The one thing that might be correct in all of this is that the water level might be equal to N, because letter N does come from the N bend of the Nile. And the cave of Happy, the flood god, makes these water signs here, is at before the first nome of Egypt, by the first cataract. So Egyptians believe that Happy came out of his cave and released the annual flood waters of the Nile. So N might be related to these. There might be truth to this one sign in all of this. So the big question is, where did this come from? So you have to go here to what's called the cardophonetic alphabet. And I've loosely been able to piece this together because I started putting all of the works of Champollion, translating them into English online and finding what he's been doing here. So if we go to Champollion here, we see he's published all these books. Egypt under the Pharaohs, Egyptian Pantheon, precise, but relative alphabet of the phonetic hieroglyphs is where this whole thing got started. So if we go over here, you can see this is where the main Champollion version of the cardophonetic alphabet started. But the actual roots of the whole thing started with Young. So in his Egypt article, he conjectured this translation, that the abacus equals P. Young didn't know it was an abacus. He thought it was just a square block. This was decoded by me last year. He said this semicircle, Young didn't know what it was, but it's now loosely known as bread, equals T. And he said that this lion sign meant OL. He said this was a superfluous symbol, meaning meaningless, didn't have a phonetic sign. And then he said this two reeds equals either I or E, depending. This platform, he said, equaled M. And this is the mummy cloth you play when you play the Afterlife game, you hold a little cloth in your hand. He said this looks like S, so this makes S. So this gave 6 alphabet letters, loosely P, T, O. He didn't say this was a letter, he said it was a Lo or Oli. He said this was Ma or M, and this was I or E, and this was Osh or Os. He didn't exactly say it was letter S, but he said it was akin to the Coptic She or Greek Sigma. So you want to strongly keep this in mind when you're reading Egyptological translation. The whole thing starts with these 6 symbols. And then Young said in his second and last cartouche that he conjectured translations for, he said that this Bernese cartouche, or Bernecki in Greek, Bernecki is spelled in the Greek section of the Rosetta Stone, and this is a cartouche sign from the Karnak Temple, but it's in Description of Egypt, Volume 3. So Young conjectured that this sign originally was on the Rosetta Stone, but it got cut off. And so he said that this spelled B. He said this was an I without people, this spelled E. The water sign spelled N, and the 2 reeds spelled I, and that this little bench symbol or whatever is superfluous, not a phonetic symbol, and then that the goose spelled K-E. And these were feminine signs, he said, the egg and the bread meant female. And then also in his same article, he said that the horned viper spelled F, the Corborean Rasian spelled E and E, and the lotus spelled Omega, or O. And he put this here. These are the first conjectured sounds, translations of hieroglyphs. So everything starts from this point. But none of this matches to what we now have as decoded as the origin of letters. For example, he says that the square block is letter P. So we now know the letter P comes from this dipole sign, which is the ecliptic pole and the celestial pole, which is below the I sign. But this gave what's called the Young alphabet, 10 letters. B is this little. He spelled this little incense bowl as B. He said the mouth equals E. The reed symbols also equals E or I. Goose equals K. Loosely the line means L, and so on down the line. So Chambalan grew on this, and he stripped away these consonant letters, and he said that this was just S. And that similarly, the line was not OL or OLE, but simply the line was L. So this gives us the so-called Chambalan alphabet, Chambalan modified alphabet. We stripped away, and now we just said that these were just pure phonetic letters, P, T, O, L, M, E, and S. But he also said that this sign, which is found in carvings of the god Ptah, he said the abacus not only equals P in Ptolemy, but it equals Phi in Ptah, which in Greek is Phi Theta A. So now we have, and Young modified the Bernese alphabet like this. And then Chambalan added in what he conjectured as Cleopatra cartouche, such that the birds equals A, and this, whatever this sign is, we don't really know, equals K, and the line equals L, and he said the D equals hand, So you'll read through all these. You just started adding on. When we look at these, we say, oh, this is really interesting. He looks like a good match to these cartouches when he was guessing his names. But you have to keep in mind that when Champollion wrote this article, the description of Egypt was just published. The year he wrote this, and there was something like 1,000 signs that were printed. And there were hundreds of cartouche rings that were printed in this description of Egypt in plate 51. So it's not necessarily a coincidence that Champollion found names and given all these examples of cartouche rings. And Young specifically said that Champollion ransacked his memory to find names in all these cartouches. It's like playing a game of memory, or he ransacked his Coptic dictionary, is what Young said. So I guess that's it. You're going to have to figure out that the alphabet letters, according to Champollion, are incorrect because he's just matching a lot of random signs, sort of like a mirage in a desert, to find words translated as he thinks in Greek. But that's about it.